There's a famous expression that goes, cleaning your house while your kids are still growing is like shoveling the walk before it stops snowing. Phyllis Adiller originally said this, and I think it's a very, very smart. I think probably every mother watching this can relate to this sentiment. I certainly can, and so probably it might be that you Jewish moms who are familiar with my website notice that recently I've gotten sort of into a cleaning mode. In fact, last week I had two whole posts on cleaning and getting kids to help clean the house. So I personally have an issue with this thing about keeping your house clean. So what happens to me is I tend to be like in a mode where like I'm sort of like calm and things are easygoing in the house and things are messy. And I'm not so strict about the kids doing their jobs and whatever. And but then I get into like a mode, like a cleaning mode, and the house has got to be clean. I'm going to make like cleaning charts, and I'm going to, everything's got to be clean. The house is just such a mess, and we have to get things in order. The problem is, and so you can probably tell I'm sort of in that mode now. The problem is that when I'm in that mode, then I get into a very, very grouchy emo mode. So it's like, so like my kids walk in the door and I'm like, why did you throw down your backpack right there? Or like then after they finish breakfast, I'm like you, and I call them back and I'll say, you forgot to put your bowl in the sink. You forgot to wash it off. Or, or like I'll come and I'll like enter like the hallway of the house and like there's a coat on the ground. So I'll say, who just left their coat here? Like just sort of in this very sort of grouchy, gotta get the house clean mode. So I just want to talk about, of course this is a very problematic way to be. So this week's pep talk is for you, but it's also for me, primarily for myself, about how to keep things in order, but also to keep a positive atmosphere in the house. So I think like the main thing to keep in mind, the main thing I need to keep in mind, is really, it's really like picking my battles. It's choosing my battles. It's choosing what's important and what's not so important. So in order to keep a healthy ratio in the house between positive interactions with my children and negative interactions with my children. So first of all, I just want to say one thing is that so my parenting teacher Dina Friedman of the Chanoch Lenara parenting series. She says something I think very important. So she says there's no such thing as a person who is never ever something or always something. So let's say like there's a person who says as a mother I'm always happy and always patient and always nurturing and always caring. It's not true. There's no such thing. And or on the other side, there's if a mother says, I'm a mother who's never angry and never lose my temper and never irritable and never impatient. Also that is never ever. It's impossible. So basically, all of us have times in which we lose our temper and in which we get irritable and which we there's just no way around it. Being a parent is like, it's like a complicated situation, and we are human. And I think a very important thing, like as a mother, is like not to forget that and to be forgiving of ourselves when we act in ways, when we do lose our temper, and when we are irritable and when we are negative, to understand like, okay, that's part of being it's part of being a Jewish mom who is a human being and not a robot, So, but something I think to keep in mind, okay, with that said, that we should be more forgiving ourselves, is to have the expectation that we should maintain, as I said, a healthy ratio between positive interactions and negative interactions. So Sarah Hannah Radcliffe, who's like a famous parenting expert, so she suggests in her book, she suggests in her parenting book, which I believe is called How to Raise Kids Without Raising Your Voice. So she suggests an 80-20 ratio. So she explains an 80% positive, nurturing, fun, good interactions with your kids versus 20% negative. So for example, 80%, reading a story with them and going on a walk with them and, telling them, saying way to go on your report card and, having like having a nice conversation with them about how school was or whatever, versus 20%, pick up your backpack, why aren't you wearing a sweater, it's tonight you're going to have to take a bath whether you like it or not. That kind of interaction. This week in Sarah Hannah Radcliffe's in her column in Family First, I think she wrote a very, very important article about this topic, about the 80-20 balance, and she says the following. So one second. This is from Family First. Um, she says, a few daily disagreements may not override a strong, positive, agreeable relationship, but too many can. Indeed, if too many disagreements happen over the course of 20 developmental years, they can pose a serious risk to the relationship later in life. It is essential, therefore, that parents reduce the overall number of disagreements that occur between them and their children. Although children can be made to obey, not always, but often, they cannot be made to agree. Therefore, it is the parents who, through their careful selection of important issues, right, as I said, picking your battles, will reduce the number of disagreements. Parents must pick their battles in order to preserve their relationships with their child. Adhering carefully to the 80-20 rule, they will ignore small incidents of less than ideal behavior, concentrating their negative attention instead on the bigger ones. And when disagreements must occur, parents will take care to manage them with sensitivity and respect for the child's feelings. Reduce conflict, reduce criticism, and reduce negativity is a recipe for successful lifelong parent-child relationships. Adhering to it helps empower a parent's educational efforts. It also helps to ensure that the parent and the adult child will enjoy each other's company for decades to come. So I just have to say, like, for me, this was really, like, a bit, like, really shook me up, this article. Because it's one thing for me to, to be, so I have a 5-year-old boy named Yoel, as you probably know. And I could just spend the whole, like, a lot of the day, like, yelling at Yoel, like, why this, and why did you do this, and stop hitting this, and why are you carrying on that stick, and why did you mess up this, and I could just spend the whole day threatening and punishing this 5-year-old. But what I really, really hope more than anything is that my boy, he's not always going to be 5 years old. He's going to be, one day he'll be 7, and one day he'll be 10, and one day he'll be 16, and one day he'll be 19, and one day he'll be, 25, 30. God willing, my little Yoa is going to be a father, and I want to have, like, a good, healthy, strong, I want him to be a healthy individual, which is a good reason to, have, to have, like, why it's important to have positive and raise him in a more positive way, not always be screaming and punishing him. But also, when he grows up, I want him to like coming and visiting, grandma, Bezrat Hashem, me, grandma, and that will maintain like a good, strong relationship together. Also when he's grown up. So, so very, very important. If you want to maintain that strong relationship with your children, like also when they're, over 18 and out of the house, we need to start investing now in creating this good, healthy relationship with them. Another take on the whole positive versus negative ratio is from a parenting expert named Rick Lavoie, and he made a very, very famous parenting video called "When the Chips Are Down." You can go to my website jewishmom.com and look up poker chip parenting, and this video will come up. And basically, what he says is he explains that that a child with self-esteem is a child with many. He says self-esteem is poker chips. So he picks up poker chips. And he says a kid with high self-esteem is a kid with a lot of poker chips, and a kid with low self-esteem is a kid with almost no poker chips. So how does a child get poker chips? A child gets poker chips through through being like the captain of the football team, or being through getting the lead part in the play, or through having a lot of friends, or through having a mother who thinks they're the greatest, and a lack of parenting chips. How does a child lose their parenting chips? Lose their poker chips is, by having by getting an F on this paper, and being, not getting a part in the school play, and by having a parent who's very critical, or having a parent who's like calls them names and is very like negative with them. So our goal, and also my teacher, I came to this video because my teacher, Rabbanit Yemima Mizrahi, so she's very, very into this approach, and she's told us about it several times, and she says like that basically our goal as a mother is to make sure that our child has that we are giving them more and more poker chips, that they're never like left with almost no poker, or God forbid a negative amount of poker chips. To always be trying to have positive interactions with them, and to build up their self-esteem, and to be good with them, and to say way to go on this and way to go on that, and you're such a good kid, and you did this so well, and the picture that you drew was so great. To try and build them up enough that then when we inevitably have to take away some poker chips for this, in order to educate them, then they'll still have a sufficient amount of poker chips to have a positive view of themselves. So with all that said, I want to give us a blessing. I want to give you a blessing. Give me a blessing. So years ago, I had a parenting teacher, my first parenting teacher ever, and her name was Rabbanit Talia Helfer. And I think that she's a phenomenal parenting teacher, and I know because things that she said to me, just it's 12 years later, 12 years since I took her class, and well, I took it 12 years, and then my last class I think was like 10 years ago with her. Things just like so stick in my mind. I remember it like she said it to me 5 minutes ago. And something that she said to me, I guess it was 12 years ago, and she said, I've never forgotten, and I think of it like at least once a week. She said that she said, she says when you are a parent with you with your kids, she says, and your kids can really drive you crazy. You can feel so angry, and she said, and you just want to scream and you want to spank them and you want to punish them and you want to lock them in your rooms. You just want to your kids are driving you crazy. She said, and it will stick like a bone in your throat. It will leave a very, very bad taste in your mouth. But you must, no matter how hard it is, you must try and do things to gain your kids' cooperation in a positive way. And it's so hard. It's one of the hardest things that we mothers have to do. But get out. You just want to scream, but no. Instead, using positive reinforcement and catching them doing something right, and make a sticker chart and encourage them and say, okay, when everyone cleans up the living room, we're gonna go out to the playground. Try and find positive ways to gain your kids' cooperation. So that Bezrat Hashem, when your kids, so they'll grow up as healthy kids, and they'll grow up to be healthy grown-ups, and so that when Bezrat Hashem, their parents, you'll still be a beloved parent to them. And bless all of you Jewish moms with an amazing, amazing week.